As many of you may know, historically, the family medicine hasn't had a strong research profile, right? There have been some really well-recognized researchers that have come from family medicine, but as a discipline, it hasn't had the same kind of exposure as, say, internal medicine or psychiatry. And that's been true for our department as well. The department has always had some level of scholarship activity, but less so in terms of what people sometimes define as big R research or things that kind of expand a little beyond that. However, probably within about the last 10 years, there's been quite a change in that. And there's been an increase in both the number of faculty who are undertaking larger scale scholarship and research projects, as well as the number of projects overall. So there's really been quite an increase in the department. Now, as you can imagine, family medicine is quite a diverse population, right? Like, we're really talking about people interested, the whole gamut of health and health system related issues. So, and that's reflected in the research profile of our faculty, who are interested in everything from medical education, residency training, undergraduate training, preparing students for exams and things along those lines, all the way to things around palliative care, caregiver support, supporting people through harm reduction activities, those kinds of things. So there's really quite a range of activities. And while people have collaborators that they work with, there hasn't really historically been a lot of internal teams that work together to kind of develop ideas, support each other. What we have had within the research program is what has been called the Research Forum, which is a more traditional kind of research talk. It happens once a month, and it's where usually somebody internal to the department, but sometimes people outside the department, where they're doing something relevant, present on finished research. And sometimes it's even research that's been published on. So it's a much more traditional style of research talk. Somebody gets up, they talk with their slides for 40, 45 minutes, and then there may be some opportunity for questions. But what Oksana identified a few years ago was that, we didn't really have a space where people came to talk about their work, not in this sort of lecture way, but things that they were thinking about, places where people could comment on it. And that was reinforced by the fact that we don't have, as I mentioned, a lot of active teams within the department that really work intensively together. There are one or two, but they focus on very specific things. So we started talking about, well, what could we maybe propose that might fill that gap a little bit? And I reminded me of the research rounds that we held prior to when I came to the University of Alberta, when I was at Women's College in Toronto, where this time was always held for research stuff, but it was used very, very flexibly. And one of the things that people were encouraged to do, if they were interested, was to come with ideas, right? Where did they want to get feedback? So we proposed this idea. Could we hold something similar to the research forum in that it would be held once a month? It wouldn't be, overly onerous on our department members, but where it would be a space where people could come to talk about their ideas or their problems in their projects. And the goal would be to have kind of a collegial group brainstorm together and give feedback and come up with some solutions. So admittedly, when this was first proposed, it kind of received, I'd say, mixed enthusiasm. Some people were like, yeah, let's give it a try. Some people were like, oh, people are too busy. Nobody wants to go to that. We've tried that before. It didn't work. We're not going to do it again. To Oksana's credit, she really pushed and went ahead with organizing it. So we held our first one back in 2018. It was held fully in person, and it was sweetened with a pizza lunch at the time. Of course, we're in our 4th year now. We've had to make some modifications, most notably the change to virtual because of the pandemic. And as well, some more guidelines have been implemented as we've sort of seen things unfold, both for better or for worse. But otherwise, we still kind of stick to the same principles, where what we aim to do is to create a space where somebody comes with a problem, and the goal is always that we're not talking about finished work. We're talking about work that's anywhere from just the idea to I want to respond to reviewer comments. Can you give me a hand on how to do this? So it runs the whole spectrum. And the goal is always sort of to help that guest, as we call them, or presenter, walk away with something actionable that they can take with them, whether it's more thinking, a specific place they need to look in the literature, people they should be talking to, or actual specific solutions to what they're asking about. That's always the goal. And it's meant to work together to help our speaker, our guest, get to that place. So that's the underlying principle of the research development round. And Oksana will walk you through a little bit about what they actually look like and how that works.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. Let's talk about processes and rules. Of course, it takes a lot of preparation to ensure a smooth run of every session. And as Andrea mentioned, we used to have our sessions every month. And then with pandemic and other things happening, we started to run them every second month. 1 month we had research forum, or have research forum, where people come and talk about their finished work, and the next month is research development rounds. So we found that it works quite well for us. Nevertheless, we also let people know that if they have something pressing or deadline approaches and they need a session out of schedule, so to say, like an irregular schedule, a scheduled session, then they're welcome to approach us and we are happy to accommodate them. The main rule, I would say, is that the focus should be on the works in development, in progress, and the focus is on the research process. As Andrea mentioned, the research forum was on the complete work, and people had no idea how research was happening, how the process took place, and especially for clinicians who have 0.10 or 0.1 FTE, right, and not always have formal training. For them, it was black box. Right, so, and quite overwhelming, I would say, too, because not knowing how the research happens, and you come and listen to the complete project outcomes, happy end, and so on. It's daunting. So the focus in the research development rounds, it's works in progress. Open to anyone in the department. Trainees, staff, faculty, research and clinical faculty, they can come as a guest, as a speaker, or as an audience member to provide feedback. So everyone is welcome. So far, we have kept it only to the department members, affiliated in one way or another, but occasionally our speakers have requests when they want to invite someone outside of our department, because they think that those people have expertise or insight in a particular aspect of the research. And we email them and send them a personal invitation to attend that one-off session. Andrea briefly mentioned that we have quite a variety of topics, and people come with new grant ideas and they want to run by and get some input feedback, grant resubmissions with feedback incorporation. We also have trainees or graduate students who come and talk about their thesis and dissertations progress, or where they encountered a particular problem or roadblock and would like some input. Any aspect of implementation, research implementation, launching a study, how to engage stakeholders and collaboration aspects, participant recruitments, you name it. how do we identify our speakers? Because sometimes it can be, dry dry weather, and we don't have anyone with urgent requests or interested. So if we encounter that type of weather, so to say, we keep our ears open, and in conversation with our colleagues, we hear that some people might be dealing with a particular challenge, and they are not sure how to go about that. So we actually go out of our way and knock on their door or send them an email and say, would you be interested in this opportunity? And people are actually quite positive in terms of responding to that, because sometimes they don't know about this opportunity, or they're shy, or they still have that idea that if you're in this department, you need to know everything by this time, and figure out how to go about solving those problems. And that's how we identify our speakers. And typically it's one speaker per session, and sometimes it's team working, like two speakers, two presenters, two speakers. If a speaker is new and has never presented or attended our research development rounds, we call them new speakers, and they require a little bit of prepping, in the sense that we talk to them about what the sessions are about, the expectations, how much preparation is expected. And in fact, preparation is minimal, slides are optional. The one thing we require from them, they have to have a clear idea what their challenge is and what kind of feedback they're looking for from the audience. Okay, we emphasize that sessions are informal. We also tell them briefly about what kind of audience usually attends, and so that they have expectations accordingly. We also emphasize that, again, with our speakers, that the focus is on the research process, any aspect of the research. Okay, and when we emphasize that, we try to take the focus from the content, because as Andrea mentioned, we have quite a diverse group in our department, and if people start to focus on their specific content, like care of the elderly, then we have issues with recruiting the audience, inviting them to attend, because they say, oh, we're not interested in, it's not my topic, I have nothing to contribute. We want the speaker and the audience to be on the same page, in the sense that we are here to focus on the research process. And in fact, when we prepare an advertisement to invite people to register and to attend the session, the thought goes into the title of the session, right? So somewhere in the title, it should be about the particular aspect of the research process. For example, launching a study, or pilot complete, phase 2 is in process, or to be launched, so that people do not focus on the content. And of course, registration, because our sessions are online, registration, it's similar to what you run in terms of registration print for this session. People have to pre-register, otherwise they cannot show up. And special invitations, I mentioned that sometimes we have guests outside of our department to join. Okay, so all this, it's up to the actual day of the session. A lot of preparation and groundwork goes into that. On the day when we kick off each session, regardless whether people attended or not before, regardless of the audience, we mention 3 ground rules for the session. The first one is that we are here to create supportive and collaborative environment. That this is a friendly den of dragons, so to say, and questions and comments are to be in the spirit of helping. We're here not because we want to become co-investigators or co-authors on the study, so we spell that out loud and say that input or feedback that you provide does not make you automatically a collaborator on the grant. And we mention explicitly that we try to create safe environment. All discussions happening here confidential, and we do not record sessions because we talk about work in progress still, right? So, and some people are concerned that they want the idea to be confidential at that point. And after after each research development round, we meet with the speaker right after the session and debrief with the presenter. We just collect verbal feedback, whether the needs that they had were met during the session, the input or feedback they received will help them move forward, whether they received actionable feedback, like items to act on. Okay, and that's pretty much our process and rules.
So that's more or less what was the intention behind the research development round, and then how we run it. And so we're happy to talk about any questions that people have, challenges that we've encountered, things we've kind of learned along the way. Anything that anybody wants to ask, we're more than happy to talk about. And we always have either Oksana or I, or both of us, just depending on availability, at the research development round to facilitate the discussion and to kind of make sure it stays, you know, on track. Yeah, for the most part, when we've had people from outside the department join, they've been already connected to someone in the department in some way. We haven't tried to recruit more broadly in other departments or in other faculty, health-related faculties. And we've gone back and forth on whether or not we should. One of the reasons why, at least so far, we haven't is just that the kind of confidentiality issue. There are some people in the department who have expressed concerns about, you know, sharing things that are not done, and would somebody take their ideas. We're not, to be honest with you, we're not always sure where that comes from, but obviously people have legitimate concerns about it. So we do try to be respectful of that. So we try to keep it to people that we know, right? And then the other piece of it, which we've also talked about, is in order to have it be a discussion, the audience can't be too big, right? So that would be the other piece that we would need, you know, we would have to grapple with, is how do we keep the discussion manageable if we were to open it more broadly?
And I will add that the original idea behind the need to have research development rounds in our department was to encourage collaboration of researchers and department members outside of their research bubbles, or even to have an idea to understand what others are working on, right? Like to create the supportive culture and collaboration spirit. So that's why we kept it to the department for now, because if people come from other areas and they need feedback on particular aspect, if we can help them, potentially we could have, but still we serve our people first, so to say.
Yeah, so we haven't capped it because we haven't really gotten to the point where we need to, but I would say on average, Oksana, what do you think? We have like about 12
10,
people.
12.
And it could probably go a bit larger, but I think once you get above maybe 20, and it maybe depends a little bit who you have in the room too, whether it's a physical or a virtual room. I think if you go much bigger than that, then it is harder to have a discussion. And then the other piece is we've had to come to kind of make sure that no one person dominates the discussion, right? So I think it just becomes a bit more challenging to keep on top of that.
Person. And as Andrea mentioned, every time we had lunch provided. Of course, it has pros and cons. People who are on campus would attend, right? But then because our department is diverse in terms of location, we have rural and remote outside of Edmonton, as well as scattered in Edmonton. So those people never joined because physical distance and time limits, right? Online, it's easier from that way, so no physical barriers, but it takes a special skill to facilitate, right? To ensure that no person dominates the entire discussion. Not to say that during in person we also have to pay attention to that, but
I mean, I think everybody is now come to see this. One of the benefits of being in person for a discussion is you can see the cues, right? When somebody looks like they might have something to say, it's a bit harder to deal with that online. But as Oksana said, because of how dispersed the department members are, the online has really offered people more opportunity to join. We have to explore whether or not we could do hybrid. We haven't tried yet because we're still kind of back and forth with who's in the office, who's not. So recently in the research program more broadly started discussing what are we going to do about meetings, because we've continued to have the main ones kind of virtually. And so one of the things that we've landed on is maybe what we need to try is a hybrid, but where everybody who's going to be there physically in person needs to bring their computer or iPad or something with them. Yeah. Everybody on the screen. I think if we were to do something for the research development rounds, we might have taken a similar approach, right? Because we need everybody to have the same opportunity for those visual cues. And the way our meeting room is set up, if you are on the screen, it's a huge screen across from a large table. So it's quite a division between who's there physically and who's there virtually. So it is something we have to grapple with sort of broadly, and it would affect research development rounds too.
We also have a rule that during the rounds we have cameras on to create a bit of more personal feel.
That's a good rule.
Yeah. And also we encourage the use of raise hand and like more civil approach to the process. We had a few hiccups at the beginning when people were learning the Zoom etiquette. Now it's better.
Yeah.
We had to do a lot of marketing, and to be fair, we're still doing it. So we talked about it at every department meeting that we had to try to sell it. We went to talk one-on-one with certain individuals. Actually, our first guest was at the time an assistant professor. She's since been promoted. And I think Oksana kind of roped her in a little bit. They're collaborators and friends, and we're very fortunate. She had a pretty good experience, and then she talked it up. So what we were able to do was the first year, I'd say we had to work, especially Oksana worked quite hard to get people to agree to do it as a guest. And then because they had good experiences, they were willing to speak up around that. So that was helpful, but we still also had to spend a fair bit of time going to talk to, some of the assistant professors in the department had sort of an informal working group that they'd created to support each other. So we would go and talk to them, like specifically about research development rounds, and explain to them exactly what it was. We would go and talk to different faculty. We'd go to the faculty development meetings. At the time, we had a communications person in the department. We went and met with her a couple of times so that she could do some write-ups for like the newsletter for us and try to help people stay involved. It was a lot of education, I'd say, to get people to see, like, we are not talking about a talk, we're talking about something different. And honestly, we still sometimes have people come, like, 3-4 years in, and they're like, oh, I didn't know that's what it was. It's like, oh, we've been talking about it for several years. But anyway, it is a lot of marketing, I'd say. What do you think, Oksana?
Yeah, and also as we were talking to people, we could see where they have misconceptions or misunderstandings, and that was eye-opening for us. And we used that to actually to our advantage next time in terms of marketing. But also I found that celebrating small successes helps. For example, someone presented to get feedback on grant application, and when I heard that that person got their grant, I made sure to announce that at the departmental meeting, saying that, by the way, let's celebrate this success. And that person attended our research development rounds, and obviously it enabled them to move forward. So something like that. And by the way, we're looking for the next speakers. And every time at the end of every meeting, either Andrea mentions or I mention, and so it's constantly on people's radars.
Mm-hmm.
We do not track like formally, we just by word of mouth.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I know that someone who presented their research in progress or proposed research for the PhD got accepted into the PhD program successfully. It's a very competitive program. They keep in touch with us, and then they tell us about their successes later, or that they got a grant, or now they're in the phase 2 of their research after they did this pilot. And so it's more like that. And then even given small kudos at meetings. For example, two of our junior clinical faculty presented, and they happen to be in the room. They feel good about themselves that they stepped out of their comfort zone, and they get kudos, and then they chime in and say how it helped them, and typically it's at the beginning when they have an idea and they want to run by and get the feel whether it makes sense, even to get it out of their head, out loud. We try to encourage deep thinking rather than, editing or solving problems, more like, at the conceptual level. Deep thinking, we're working on that still.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
and given the various levels of research training and background and how people think and operate. And what do you think, Andrea?
Yeah, I would agree. Most of them are kind of earlier. We have had a handful where, for example, when things had to switch online because of the pandemic, there was a large project that it really impacted what they were going to do for recruiting people and engaging people, because it was sort of a in-person intervention that they were planning. So they wanted some advice on how were they going to deal with some of these things moving. So that was a very kind of practical, how do we do X, Y, and Z now that we're doing things online. Occasionally we've had somebody come with reviewer comment, a grant that didn't get funded, but they have reviewer comments. So they want to kind of walk through them and get feedback as we're talking through things, and what are things they should consider, what can they kind of, leave to the side. But it's true, most of them come earlier, either, as Oksana said, they have an idea and they need help kind of articulating it, narrowing down, what's the real research objective going to be here. Or sometimes it's around helping to clarify steps and how they're going to actually carry something out.
And for junior colleagues who are just joining the department, let's say with point one research, they have no idea what it takes for point one, and they have lots of research interest and or research questions they want to explore in one project. So it's even helping them understand that it's one, two questions, like help them focus, and it helps them to demystify the research process and the expectations, so to say.
Yeah, one of the things I would just add is that I think we're not unique. I think it's probably similar in many places like our department. There's a large number of faculty who have point one sort of scholarship or research with limited to no formal training and research. So they have not seen it done, right? It's never been modeled for them. They've never had formal training. They are walking into something pretty much unprepared. And there is a broad misconception, for example, that they have to do everything by themselves, right? So we want to offer them a place. Like we said, there's no guarantee that participation means you're going to be a collaborator or co-author, but what we do want people to really get a sense of is that research, health research in particular, is a team sport, right? Yeah. And they don't need to feel like they're on their own, that they can find a supportive group that can help them in a variety of capacities.
One of the goals we're striving for is that people come back. Like if we have a speaker and they presented on their idea, then hopefully they get some actionable feedback. Then maybe in a few months they come with a different challenge that they encountered in implementing the idea, right? So we want to build a bit of continuity, not just one off, so that they feel welcome to come back again. And also we would like to have a more stable attendance as much as possible, because you never know who will, like we have a rough idea who will come through the registration, but then not all of those people show up, and then we would like to have a more stable attendance, and getting more remote and rural people join us. Unfortunately, it's we run them on specific day. It's Thursday, and at 11. We would like to keep that as a stable time, so that people know that's the time reserved for the research development rounds. But for some people, it's like middle of the day. I'm in the clinic and might go to work. So
yeah. And we, like to Oksana's point about trying to build some continuity, it sort of reflects a bit of a broader goal of the research program, which is to foster more programmatic research where people have, lots of linked work as opposed to one studies in lots of places. So, of course, we're still happy to support that, because there will be many people who continue to work that way, but where we can help to support people as they build and continue their programs of work, we'd like to do that too. I'd be interested to hear how other places help to foster this, right? Because I think when you are in a sort of traditionally research-oriented environment, there's a lot of this that's already kind of there and people know what they're doing and blah, blah, blah. But when you move outside of that, even into, departments of family medicine or other departments where the research culture has just been quite different, it's useful to see how some of these pieces are established and how you can support that team building and collaboration. And even how do you know what the person down the hall from you is doing, right? Like sometimes that's more of a challenge than you might realize. And really trying to get people to see like, oh, okay, it's not my area of work, but it's still interesting and it's still worth me really knowing about, even though I'm not going to be the expert. And getting them sometimes to see like, oh, you never know where you're going to hear something that's really going to just twig something for you, right? So really trying to build that culture of being very interested, despite people also being very busy. I guess my only thought would be, even if people tell you, we're not that interested, or no, we don't want to come, sometimes you've got to just push it a little bit and tell people, like remind them, it's okay if it doesn't work the first time. We can try again, we can tweak it, we can build it. Like it is a slow process, and culture change of any kind is really slow. So I think it's kind of just having the will to keep at it, right? So it's been good, I think, to work with Oksana for us to be together on it, because when one of us is like, oh, I can't do this anymore, the other one has a little bit of like a rallying spirit, right? So you need a team like that.
Or if one goes on mat leave, or
yeah,
so one steps in.
Happens. Yeah.
But at the same time, you can use this as a strategy kind of to regroup after a pandemic, right? And people are looking for ways to get back, to be motivated to get back and work together, how to do that. And so it's kind of, let's explore it together. And this is one of the options too.